A hand cracked across a girl's face. She hit the stone floor hard, her knees skidding across wet marble, a bucket tipping over beside her. Gray water spread out and soaked the hem of her dress. Above her, a heavy boot pressed down on her fingers. She did not scream. She had learned long ago that screaming only made it worse. A low growl rolled up from somewhere near the wall, and an old scarred wolfhound bared his teeth. The man laughed and kicked the bucket away. This was the night the whole keep would celebrate, and no one cared at all what happened to the girl who scrubbed its floors. Her name was Isolde Vane, and she was about to break the one rule that could get her killed. What made an Alpha King stop his own vow and cross a crowded hall? Stay with me on this one. Let me back up and tell you how she got there. Isolde had scrubbed the floors of Ravenhollow Keep since she was 9. She was 19 now. Thin, quick, hands gone rough from cold water and lye soap. She kept her head down and her voice small. In a pack this size, a servant who stayed invisible stayed alive. That was the whole trick of it. Don't be seen. Don't be heard. Don't give anyone a reason to remember your name. The keep was built into the side of a mountain, all gray stone and long cold halls, home to the most powerful wolf king in 300 miles. His name was Cassius Thorn, Alpha King. Isolde had never once spoken to him. She'd seen him maybe a dozen times, always from a distance, pressed flat against a wall to let him pass. Tall, broad through the shoulders. He moved like something that had never once been afraid in its life. When he walked through a room, grown men who could turn into wolves stepped back and lowered their eyes. And tonight, he was getting engaged. The whole keep had been buzzing about it for a month. Cassius Thorn was going to bind himself to Lady Seraphine Duval, a highborn she-wolf from a wealthy allied pack in the eastern valleys. A good match. A smart match. 2 strong bloodlines, 2 rich territories, joined with a vow spoken in front of 300 guests. The kind of thing songs get written about. Isolde was not invited, obviously. Servants never were. Her job that night was simple. Scrub the back stairs, haul the dirty water down to the kitchens, and stay out of the Great Hall. The Great Hall was forbidden to her. Flat out forbidden. The head steward, a heavy-set man named Garrick with a mean streak a mile wide, had made that very clear. "You don't go up there," he'd told her that afternoon, jabbing a finger at her chest. "Not tonight, not for any reason. A girl like you belongs down here with the mops. You show your face in that hall and I'll have the skin off your back. Understand me?" She understood. Garrick was the one who'd knocked her to the floor in that opening moment, by the way. He liked to remind her where she stood. He'd been doing it for years. The only friend she had in the whole keep was Bram. Bram was an old wolfhound, gray around the muzzle, one ear torn half off, a long scar down his flank from some fight nobody remembered. He wasn't a pack wolf. He was just a dog. A big scruffy dog that had wandered up to the kitchen door as a starving pup years ago, and Isolde had fed him scraps when no one was looking. Ever since, he followed her everywhere, slept at her feet, growled at anyone who raised a hand to her. He was the only living thing in that whole mountain that seemed to think she mattered. So that was Isolde's world. A bucket, a mop, a mean steward, an old dog, and a great hall she was never allowed to enter. She had made her peace with all of it. Almost. But here's the thing. That night, from the bottom of the back stairs, she could hear the music. It came drifting down through the stone, soft and golden, the sound of strings and pipes and 300 voices all murmuring together. She could smell the food. Roasted meat and honey cakes and spiced wine, all of it floating down to where she stood in her wet dress with her raw hands, and something in her chest just ached. She had never once seen a ball, not a real one. She had spent 10 years cleaning up after other people's celebrations and never been allowed inside a single one. She looked down at Bram. The old dog looked back up and thumped his tail once against the stone. "Just once," she whispered to him, "just to look, nobody has to know." She knew it was stupid. She knew what Garrick would do if he caught her. But something pulled at her that night, something she couldn't explain, like the music was calling her by a name she didn't know she had. And so, against every ounce of good sense she owned, Isolde Vane picked up the hem of her wet dress and she started to climb. There was a servant's passage she knew, a narrow stone stair that wound up the back of the great hall and came out at a shadowed balcony high above the floor. In the old days it had been used by musicians. Now it was just dust and cobwebs and forgotten. Nobody went up there. From that balcony, hidden in the dark, she could see the whole hall without a single soul seeing her. Bram climbed the stairs beside her, silent as smoke pressed close against her leg. Good dog. He always seemed to know when quiet mattered. At the top she stopped, and she forgot how to breathe. The great hall spread out below her, and it was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. Hundreds of candles, gold everywhere. Wolves in fine clothes, silks and velvets in every color, spinning slow across a floor so polished it threw the candlelight back up at them. And there, at the far end on a raised dais, stood Cassius Thorne. He wore black and silver. A crown of dark iron sat on his head. Beside him stood Lady Seraphine in a gown the color of deep red wine, beautiful and cold and perfectly still. An old wolf in robes, some kind of pack elder, stood before them, ready to speak the binding words. Isolde sank down behind the stone railing, just her eyes above the edge, and watched. Her heart was pounding so hard she was sure the whole hall could hear it, but nobody looked up. Nobody ever looked up. She was safe in the dark, exactly where a girl like her belonged, watching a world she would never be part of. The elder raised his hands and the hall went quiet. He began to speak. "We gather tonight," he said, his voice carrying to every corner, "to bind our Alpha King, Cassius Thorne, to Lady Seraphine Duval, that two great bloodlines may become one, and that this pack may stand stronger than ever before." Cassius stood tall. His face gave away nothing. He was a king doing a king's duty, and there was no warmth in it, no joy, nothing at all, just stone. "If any wolf here objects to this binding," the elder went on, the old words of the ritual, "let them speak now, or hold their silence evermore." Nobody spoke. Of course nobody spoke. Who would dare? The elder turned to Cassius. "Then speak your vow, my king." And Cassius Thorne opened his mouth to bind himself forever to a woman he did not love. He got 3 words out. "I, Cassius Thorne." Then he stopped. Isolde watched his whole body go rigid. His head came up. His nostrils flared. And slowly, terribly, he turned his face toward the ceiling, toward the shadows, toward the dark balcony where a servant girl was hiding. She stopped breathing. He couldn't have. There was no way. 300 people between them, all that perfume and roasted meat and spiced wine, all that noise. There was no possible way he could catch one scent, her scent, drifting down from all the way up here. But he had. His eyes found the dark. And even from that distance, even in the shadows, Isolde felt them land on her like a hand closing around her heart. Cassius Thorne raised one hand. The musicians stopped. Every string, every pipe cut off at once, and the sudden silence hit the hall like a slap. 300 guests froze. Lady Seraphine turned to stare at him. The elder faltered mid-word. "My king," the old wolf said, "what is?" Cassius didn't answer. He stepped down off the dais. And here's where Isolde's whole world came apart. Because she understood in that one frozen second exactly what was happening. She had been caught. The Alpha King himself had smelled a servant trespassing on the most important night of his life, and now he was coming to deal with her in front of the entire pack. She would be dragged out, beaten, maybe worse. Garrick had promised the skin off her back for far less. She scrambled backward from the railing. Get down the stairs. Get to the kitchens. Get gone before anyone sees your face. She grabbed Bram's collar and turned to run, but the old dog wouldn't move. He was staring down at the hall, tail low, a strange sound rumbling in his chest that wasn't quite a growl. "Bram, come on," she hissed. "Please, we have to go." Below her she could hear it now. Footsteps. Slow, heavy, deliberate footsteps crossing that vast polished floor. The whole hall silent except for the sound of the Alpha King walking. Everyone watching. Everyone wondering where in the world he was going. He was coming to the balcony stairs. Isolde ran. She flew down the narrow passage in the dark, her feet slipping on the worn stone, one hand dragging along the wall. Bram thundered down behind her. She burst out the low door at the bottom into the back corridor, gasping, and for one wild second she thought she'd made it. She thought she'd gotten away clean. She rounded the corner toward the kitchen stairs, and there stood Cassius Thorne blocking her path. He hadn't taken the balcony stairs at all. He'd known another way. He'd cut her off. And now the most powerful wolf in 300 miles stood between Isolde Vane and her only escape, close enough to touch, staring down at her like she was the only thing in the entire world. She dropped to her knees. Right there on the cold stone, she pressed her forehead nearly to the floor the way she'd been taught. "Forgive me, my king," she whispered, the words tumbling out fast and frightened. "I never meant to trespass. I only wanted to look. Just once. I swear I'll never come near the hall again. Please, please don't." "Stop." His voice was low, rough. It cut her off cold. She flinched, waiting for the blow. Bram pressed against her side, that strange sound still rumbling in his old chest. But the blow didn't come. Instead, she heard the Alpha King of Ravenhollow, this king of stone, drop down to one knee in front of her. A servant, on the dirty floor of a back corridor. And when he spoke again, his voice had gone strange and raw and almost broken. "Look at me," Cassius said. She didn't dare. "Please," he said. And that word please from a king to a floor scrubber was so impossible that it made her lift her head. His eyes were locked on her face. And there was something in them she had never once seen on any wolf who'd ever looked at her. Not disgust, not anger. Something that looked, impossibly, like he'd just found something he'd spent his whole life missing. "It's you," Cassius Thorne whispered. "It's been you this whole time." And down the corridor behind him, drawn by the silence and the sight of their king kneeling before a servant, the guests began to gather, whispering, staring. 300 pairs of eyes, and every single one of them now fixed on the girl no one was ever supposed to notice. For one long moment nobody moved. Cassius knelt there, staring at her like a starving man staring at bread, and Isolde knelt in front of him, too terrified to understand. The old dog leaned into her side. And the whispering behind the king grew louder. Then a voice cut through it. "Sharp, cold, Lady Seraphine." "Cassius." She pushed through the crowd, her wine-red gown sweeping the stone, her face white with fury. "Cassius, what in the name of the moon are you doing? Get up off the floor. You are humiliating me. You are humiliating this entire pack." Kneeling in front of that, a servant. But Cassius didn't get up. He didn't even look at her. He reached out slow and took Isolde's rough, scarred hand in both of his and held it like it was made of glass. "Say something," he said to Isolde, ignoring the whole world. "Say anything. I need to hear your voice again. I've been dreaming about it for months and I didn't even know it was real." Isolde's mind was spinning, months dreaming. She had never spoken to this man in her life. My king, I don't understand." His eyes closed, just for a second, like her voice was water and he'd been thirsty for 100 years. "There it is," he breathed. Then he opened his eyes and looked at her, really looked at her, and said the words that stopped Isolde Vane's heart dead in her chest. "You're my mate," Cassius Thorne said. "The moon bound us. I've felt you in this keep for a year and I couldn't find you. I could smell you in the halls after you'd already gone. I dreamed about a voice I'd never heard. And tonight I finally caught it all the way from that balcony, over everything, over everyone. It's you. You're the one. You've been here the whole time, right under my feet, and I never knew. Now hold on. I have to stop and tell you what those words meant, because a human might not understand what just happened. To wolves, a fated mate is everything. It's the one soul the moon itself chooses for you, once in your whole life, and there is nothing on earth more sacred, more powerful, more unbreakable. An alpha who finds his true mate will burn down the world before he lets her go. And Cassius Thorne, who had spent a year haunted by a scent and a voice he couldn't place, who had agreed to marry a stranger only because he'd given up ever finding the real thing, had just found her, kneeling on a dirty floor, in a servant's wet dress, with raw red hands. And if you're still with me and your heart is pounding as hard as Isolde's was, do me one favor. Hit that subscribe button and stay right where you are, because what happened next changed everything. Lady Seraphine went from white to red. "No," she said. "No, this is madness. You are the Alpha King. You do not throw away an alliance, a bloodline, 300 guests for a mop girl. There are laws, there is tradition. You cannot bind yourself to a servant. The pack will never accept it. The elders will never allow it." And she wasn't wrong. That's the thing you have to understand. She wasn't wrong at all. Because now the elder came forward, the old wolf in robes, his face grave. And the trouble that walked in with him was worse than any fist Garrick had ever raised. This wasn't about one angry steward anymore. This was about the whole weight of pack law coming down on a girl who had no name and no blood, and no standing at all. "My king," the elder said carefully, "I saw what I saw. I do not doubt the bond. A fated mate cannot be faked, and I can smell it on you now, both of you. But Lady Seraphine speaks true. There is a law, the oldest law we have." Cassius went still. "Say it." The elder swallowed. "A servant of no blood cannot stand beside an Alpha King, not by tradition, by law. It was written by your own great-grandfather to keep the royal line pure. For this girl to be your mate, she would have to be recognized as pack, true-born, and she is not. She is a foundling with no line, no name that anyone here will honor. The law is clear, my king. Even a fated mate, if she is base-born, may be set aside, and the alliance with the Duvals may proceed." The corridor went dead silent. Do you see what just happened? A minute ago, the danger was that a girl had been caught trespassing. Now the danger was the law itself. The whole ancient machine of the pack, 300 years of tradition, all of it turning against her at once. Cassius could feel the bond. It didn't matter. The law could tear her right out of his hands, and there wasn't a wolf in that hall with the standing to stop it, except one. And even he was bound by it. "There is more," the elder went on, quieter now, and this was the part that made Isolde's blood run cold. "By that same law, a base-born wolf who claims a bond above her station may be cast out of the pack entirely, banished to the mountains alone. Some have called it a mercy. In winter, it is a death sentence." So there it was. Isolde had climbed those stairs for one look at a ball, and now she was kneeling on the floor being told that the moon had chosen her for a king, and the law of that same king's pack might kill her for it. Cassius rose slowly to his feet, and the whole corridor felt the temperature drop. His eyes had gone hard and gold and dangerous, and when he spoke, his voice was the voice of the wolf that made grown men lower their gaze. "Let me be very clear," he said, "so that no one in this pack ever misunderstands me again. This woman is my fated mate. Mine, chosen by the moon before any of us drew breath, and any wolf who lays a hand on her, any wolf who speaks of banishing her, of setting her aside, of casting her into the snow, will answer to me, personally. Do you understand?" "My king," the elder said, pained, "you cannot break your own law by force. If you set aside law for love, every rule that holds this pack together crumbles. Your enemies will say the Alpha King bends the law when it suits him. You would be strong tonight and weak forever after. That is not a threat. It is the truth, and you know it. And here's the terrible thing. Cassius did know it. Isolde saw it land on his face. He could fight for her, he could kill for her, but if he simply tore up the law with his bare hands, he'd win her and lose the pack, and a broken pack in these mountains doesn't last a single winter. Their enemies were always watching. He was the king. He couldn't just be a man in love. He had to be right in front of everyone, or it all fell apart. Cassius looked down at Isolde. And for the first time, she saw the king afraid, not of a fight, of losing her to a rule written by a dead man. "There has to be a way," he said, low, just to her. "Tell me you'll wait. Tell me you won't run." And Isolde, kneeling on the floor with the whole world against her, found something she didn't know she had. She found her voice, not the small servant's whisper, her real voice. "I've been invisible my whole life," she said. "I've never had anything worth staying for. If you're telling me the truth, if the moon really chose me, then I'm not running from the first thing that ever chose me back. I'll wait, find the way." Cassius Thorne smiled, the first real smile anyone in that hall had seen on his face in years. Now the way was found, but not the way anyone expected. And it came from the last place in the world Isolde would have looked. It came from Bram. The old scarred wolfhound had been sitting silent this whole time, pressed against Isolde's side. But now he stood. And that strange rumble in his chest rose up into something that wasn't a dog's sound at all. It was a wolf's sound. And in front of 300 staring guests, the old gray dog everyone had ignored for years began, painfully, slowly, to change. His bones shifted. His torn ear straightened. The scar on his flank pulled tight over shoulders that grew broad and human. And where an old wolfhound had crouched, there now knelt an ancient gray-haired man, thin, scarred, his eyes wet and fixed on Isolde's face. The hall gasped as one. Because a dog cannot become a man. Only a wolf can. Bram had never been a dog at all. 10 years, the old man rasped, his voice cracked from a decade of silence. 10 years I could not speak. Forgive me, child. Forgive me. Isolde couldn't move. Bram. That is not my name. Tears ran down into his gray beard. My name is Aldrich Vane, and you, Isolde, you are my granddaughter. The elder in robes staggered back a step. Vane, he whispered. That's impossible. The Vane line was destroyed. Aldrich Vane was the old king's own war marshal. His whole family was killed in the raid 20 years ago when Isolde was a babe. There were no survivors. There was one, Aldrich said, forcing himself upright on shaking legs. One. A newborn girl I carried out of the fire with my teeth because they'd already broken my body and I could not hold her in my arms. I ran to the only safe place I knew, this keep. I left her at the kitchen door in the dark and I stayed to guard her, in the only shape my broken body could still hold. A hound. I have watched over my granddaughter every day of her life, and I could not tell a soul who she was, because the wolves who murdered her parents still walk these mountains, and a nameless servant girl is safe. A true-born Vane heir is a target. He turned to Cassius, and he bowed his old gray head to his king. But she is true-born, my king, as high-born as any wolf in this hall, blood of the old war marshal. There is no purer line in Ravenhollow. Let the elder deny it now. Let anyone deny it. I am Aldrich Vane, and I have finally lived long enough to say her name out loud. The corridor exploded into noise. But the elder's voice rose over all of it, and this time it was shaking with something like wonder. The law, he said slowly, requires only that the mate be true-born and of recognized line. It says nothing of servants or kings. He looked at Isolde like he was seeing her for the very first time. By blood, she outranks every guest in this hall save the king himself. There is no law to break. There never was. We simply did not know who she was. And just like that, the whole ancient machine that had been about to grind Isolde into the snow went quiet and turned and had nothing left to say. Lady Seraphine understood before anyone. She looked at Cassius. She looked at Isolde. And whatever cold pride had held her up all night, it bent just a little. She was not a kind woman. But she was not a fool either. The alliance can be salvaged with trade and marriage among the lesser houses, she said stiffly. I will not stand where I am not chosen. I am not so desperate as that. She gathered her wine-red skirts. Congratulations, Alpha King. It seems the moon has a crueler sense of humor than any of us. And she walked away, chin high, and that was the last anyone made trouble that night. Cassius reached down and took both of Isolde's hands and drew her up off the floor. Up off her knees for the last time in her life. He didn't care about her wet dress or her rough hands or the water still cold on the hem. He looked at Aldrich. Your granddaughter, Cassius said, will not spend one more night as a servant in this keep. And you, War Marshal, will never sleep at a kitchen door again. You have my word, and the word of an Alpha King is stone. Then the crowd, 300 wolves who moments ago had watched their king kneel to a mop girl, did something no one expected. Slowly, one by one, they knelt, to her, to Isolde Vane, true-born daughter of a lost line fated mate of the Alpha King, the girl who had climbed a dark stair for one look at a world she thought could never be hers. That was the night everything changed. But let me tell you how it settled, because that matters just as much. Garrick, the steward, tried to slip away in the chaos. He didn't get far. 2 of the king's guard had him by the arms before he reached the door. Cassius didn't shout at him. He didn't have to. He just looked at the man who'd knocked Isolde to the floor 100 times over the years and said, very quietly, "You struck my mate, for years. You will leave this keep tonight and you will not come back, and every day you live you will know how close you came to something far worse." And Garrick, white and shaking, was gone by morning. Isolde didn't watch him go. He wasn't worth the space in her memory anymore. They didn't rush the binding. Cassius wouldn't let them. You waited 19 years to be seen, he told her. I'm not going to make you rush the one part of your life that's yours. So Isolde was given rooms in the high keep, real rooms, with windows that looked out over the whole mountain valley. She learned that the hands that had scrubbed floors could also hold a pen, and she learned her letters late but quick. Aldrich moved into the rooms beside hers, and day by day his cracked voice grew stronger, and he told her all the things he'd stored up for 10 silent years. Her mother's laugh, her father's temper, the color of the house they'd lived in before the fire. She got her whole family back one story at a time. And Cassius, the king of stone, it turned out he wasn't stone at all. He just never had a reason to be anything else. He'd walk with her along the high battlements in the evenings, both of them quiet, her hand tucked into his arm, and the whole pack would watch their Alpha King soften a little more every day. He told her once late that the year before he found her had been the loneliest of his life, that he'd smell her in a hallway and turn around and find nothing and start to think he was going mad. You were a ghost I couldn't stop chasing, he said. And you were real the whole time, right here, scrubbing my floors while I searched the whole kingdom for you. You could have just looked down, Isolde said, and he laughed, and it was a good sound. They were bound under the full moon 3 months later, not because anyone forced it, and not to seal an alliance or join 2 bloodlines, just because 2 people had been chosen for each other before either of them drew breath, and had finally found their way across a crowded hall. Isolde wore no borrowed finery. She wore a simple gown the color of moonlight, and her grandfather, standing tall and gray and proud in the shape of a man at last, walked her the length of the great hall she had once been forbidden to enter. She thought about that a lot in the years after, how close it had all come to never happening. If she'd listened to Garrick, if she'd stayed down in the kitchens with the mops where a girl like her belonged, if she'd never climbed that dark stair for one stolen look at a ball she thought she'd never be part of. She'd broken the one rule that could have gotten her killed, and it turned out to be the rule that saved her whole life. Sometimes, on quiet nights, Cassius would find her standing on that old forgotten balcony, the one where he'd first caught her scent drifting down through 300 guests. She liked it up there. She'd look down at the great hall full of candlelight and remember the girl who'd crouched in that same shadow with her heart pounding, certain she was about to be dragged out and punished for wanting one beautiful thing. "What are you thinking?" he asked her once, coming up the narrow stair to stand beside her. She leaned into him. Down below, an old gray man was laughing with the elders, whole and free after 20 years. The music played. The candles burned. "I'm thinking nobody ever looked up," she said. "My whole life nobody ever looked up here. Except you." Cassius wrapped an arm around her and pulled her close. "I'll always look up," he said. "For the rest of my life, I'll always know exactly where you are." Down in the hall, the music played on, and nobody in that whole mountain keep called Isolde Vane invisible ever again. Tightened to write around 5,000 words inside target. The 150-word hook is untouched, and the final line lands exactly as before. Every key beat is intact. The forbidden climb, the interrupted vow, the mate reveal, the CTA after the first payoff, the Packlaw trigger, Aldrich's transformation, Seraphine's exit, Garrick's dismissal, and the full resolution. Cuts came from doubled descriptions and redundant asides in the setup and middle, not from story content.